It's 32 degrees Celsius. That's 90 Fahrenheit for you Americans. There's no air conditioning, and you're wearing 3 layers of wool. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Enjoy your slow roast. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where climate control means opening a window and hoping the wind feels generous. Forget thermostats and cool air on demand. Your medieval home was built to trap heat, great for winter, terrible for summer. Walls were thick, insulation was non-existent, and the one tiny window in your room was designed for keeping warmth in, not letting it out. If you're a peasant, it's probably just a wooden shutter. If you're rich, you might have glass. But that's basically a sun magnifier. So the first step in surviving summer is adjusting your expectations. You're not going to be cool. The goal here is to avoid passing out in a puddle of your own sweat while a chicken stares at you. During the day, the heat seeps into everything. Your bed feels warm before you even lie down. Your clothes trap every bit of body heat, and taking layers off isn't as simple as it sounds. Stripped down too far, and congratulations, you're now accused of indecent exposure and explaining yourself to the local priest. And the smell? Everyone smells. There's no deodorant aisle at the market. Bathing is occasional at best, and in some places, suspicious. You just accept that you, your family, and half the village have a permanent eau de barnyard aroma from June to August. The rich might have a few tricks. A stone manor stays slightly cooler than a wooden hut, so they'll lounge inside like lazy cats. They might even have an underground cellar with ice stored from winter, a luxury so rare it's practically wizardry. Meanwhile, you, the average villager, are sitting in the shade of a tree, waving a piece of cloth at your face and hoping a breeze shows up before the harvest season. Nights aren't much better. Forget crisp, cool evening air. You're lying in a stuffy room with your family, maybe even sharing the space with animals for warmth, which in summer just means extra body heat and more smell. Opening the door helps, but then the bugs arrive. Mosquitoes, flies, and the occasional rat are the medieval equivalent of your modern AC unit breaking down mid-July, irritating, noisy, and impossible to ignore. So here's your reality check. There's no beating the heat in the Middle Ages. You slow down. You find shade. You drink ale because the water might kill you. And you pray for rain, not because you need it for the crops, but because standing outside in a downpour is the closest you'll get to air conditioning. That's step 1 of surviving summer without AC in medieval Europe. Understand that comfort is a lie, and the best you can do is not cook yourself alive before harvest time. Once you've accepted that cool is just a fairy tale in the Middle Ages, you can move on to step 2, finding ways to pretend you're not slowly roasting. The simplest trick? Shade. Shade is your best friend. You find a tree, a wall, or the shadow of a large, suspiciously leaning barn, and you stay there. If you're lucky, you'll catch a breeze. If you're unlucky, you'll just stare at a goat for 3 hours and try not to think about how sweaty you are. Sleeping outside was another option, but it came with trade-offs. Sure, you'd get more air, but you'd also wake up covered in dew, bugs, and possibly a chicken that decided your blanket was a good place to sleep. If you're noble, you might nap in a walled garden where servants can shoo away the pests. If you're a peasant, you just accept that you are now part of the food chain. Then there's the manual fan method. If you're rich, you can have someone stand next to you, waving a fan made of feathers or woven reeds. If you're poor, you are the fan. You wave your hat, your hand, or a bit of cloth until your arm gets tired, then switch arms and keep going. It's less luxurious cooling and more slow arm workout with light airflow, Water was the medieval air conditioner, if you had access to it. A cold bath in a river or stream could take the edge off the heat, assuming you avoided the sharp rocks, the leeches, and whatever the pigs did upstream. If you lived near the sea, you could swim. But salt water meant your skin would itch for days unless you rinsed off, which just brought you back to the leech-filled river. Indoors, some people kept curtains or shutters closed during the day to keep out the sun. It worked. Sort of. You ended up sitting in the dark, sweating and wondering if the breeze outside was better than the stale air inside. Spoiler, it was. And of course there was clothing strategy. You couldn't just strip down to shorts and a t-shirt. That would get you a visit from the moral police. Instead, people switched to lighter linen clothing and looser layers knit in the medieval version of summer fashion. It didn't make you cool, but at least it made sweating slightly less miserable. If you were clever or desperate, you might also time your day around the heat. Work early in the morning before the sun cooked you alive. Rest in the hottest hours of the afternoon. Then get back to work in the evening, which was cooler if you ignored the mosquitoes. Medieval cooling methods weren't about comfort. They were about survival. Finding the smallest relief possible and hanging on until the sun finally went down. Because in a world without air conditioning, you weren't trying to stay fresh. You were just trying to avoid being the first person in the village to collapse in a sweaty heap. If medieval architecture couldn't save you from the heat, maybe your stomach could. Because step 3 in surviving a summer without air conditioning is all about what you eat and drink. And more importantly, what you don't. First, hydration. Today you might reach for ice water or an energy drink. In the Middle Ages you'd reach for ale, not because it was trendy, but because water could kill you. Small beer and weak ale with low alcohol was the everyday drink for peasants. It kept you hydrated and slightly less miserable, even if it tasted like someone left bread in a puddle for a week. Nobles might drink watered wine instead, which sounds classy until you remember that watered meant safe enough to not give you immediate stomach problems. Cold drinks were a luxury. Most beverages were served lukewarm because that's what the weather and storage allowed. If you were rich enough, you might have ice stored from the winter in deep cellars packed in straw. It wouldn't last all summer, but for a few glorious weeks you could have chilled wine while your peasants sweated in the fields. Food mattered too. You didn't want heavy, steaming stews in the middle of the day unless you enjoyed feeling like you'd swallowed a small furnace. Instead, people ate bread, cheese, fruit if it was in season, and whatever could be eaten cold. Fresh produce was a treat. In early summer, you might have berries, greens, and early vegetables. By late summer, it was whatever hadn't spoiled yet. And no, there were no refrigerators. You either ate it fast or fed it to the pigs before it turned into something with its own ecosystem. There were also foods people believed had cooling properties. Cucumbers, certain herbs, and dairy were thought to cool the body, according to medieval medical theory. It was all based on balancing humors. A system of health so inaccurate it makes modern fad diets look like hard science. If you were working outside in the heat, you'd probably eat the biggest meal in the morning or evening when it was cooler. Midday food was light, partly to avoid overheating and partly because the thought of heavy labor right after a hot lunch was enough to make you reconsider living. And then there was the river method. Keep your drink cool by placing it in a bucket lowered into a well or in a basket submerged in a stream. It worked surprisingly well, unless, of course, someone upstream decided to wash their laundry or their livestock. So yes, food and drink could help you survive summer in the Middle Ages. But it wasn't about gourmet experiences. It was about not collapsing in the heat because you decided to eat a pot of hot cabbage soup at noon. Keep it light, keep it drinkable, and if your drink's got a little foam on top, that's just medieval hydration science.